Good morning and welcome to Friday's Daily Devotion. I'm Linda Black from South Canyon Lutheran Church, and I'm really glad to be with you today. A couple of weeks ago, I started a few weeks looking at scripture having to do with Hallowed. And I read from the third chapter of Exodus, which is Moses' call story. And we find in this passage Moses encountering the burning bush and wanting to go closer because he couldn't understand why that bush wasn't being consumed by the fire. And he heard God talking, and he said, "Here I am." And then God asked him to remove his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. And it wasn't just because that specific place was holy, it was because that is where God came to Moses, making that holy ground to Moses. That is where God called Moses to free the Israelites from Egypt. But Moses' response was one of reluctance. So today I want to read another call passage, and this one is from Isaiah, the 6th chapter, verses 1 through 8. Again, it's Isaiah 6, verses 1 through 8. And we find this is Isaiah's call after the death of King Uzziah. And I think we might hear some similarities, but some differences here. So let's listen to that passage. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The pivots on the threshold shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, "Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes, they have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. And the seraph touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed, and your sin is blotted out." And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." So in this reading, we find Isaiah in the temple. And what he describes here is, I think, what we would call a hallowed experience. Great holiness. Because what he says is he saw the Lord with seraphs, surrounded by seraphs around him. And the seraphs called out in verse 3, I'll read it again, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." And they called it out so loud that it almost thundered the temple. Can you imagine? It's hard to imagine having an experience like that. And it must have been just really, really overwhelming for Isaiah. And it's no wonder then that he was struck by his own inadequacies and his own unworthiness. But you know what? He is humbled by this experience because he understands that God is not there to hurt him, but to forgive him. forgive him for all of those inadequacies that he feels he has and for his unworthiness. He doesn't have to sacrifice at the altar like we read about in so many of those Old Testament stories. But the seraph brings the fire of the altar, that coal, and touches his mouth. That is Isaiah's cleansing. He knows he is forgiven. He is clean. And he responds to God after that, saying, "Here I am, send me." That response is different than Moses' response. Moses is unsure and he does not want to go. And Isaiah says, "Send me." He wants to go. And yet they both go. They both answer their call. I think we all have different call experiences for whatever it is that God has called us to do. Sometimes we hold back and sometimes we plow forward full steam ahead. But I think when we read Isaiah before and after this passage, we read about a people that has left God behind, but not about God leaving the people behind. And just as God never left those people behind, God never leaves us behind, no matter how much we forget about God. God is always there for us. And all we have to do, I think, is to think about how we can wait for God to reveal God's self to us in a face-to-face encounter, just like Moses and Isaiah had. And we find other experiences like that throughout the scripture. So let's be open to having that hallowed experience, that experience of holiness where we can encounter God face to face. And I think with that, even if we don't have that today or tomorrow, we know that we can thank God every day for the forgiveness and the cleansing that we have from our own inadequacies and our unworthiness as human beings. And to that I say, thanks be to God. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.